Welcome everyone to the Travel to Burrell Collection program. I'm Jesse Lazar, Executive Director of the Center for Architecture here in New York. This event is part of our Archtober Virtual Travel to series in partnership with Bloomberg Connects. The Travel to series highlights Bloomberg Connects partners that feature iconic architecture and historically significant sites across the United States and around the world. Curators, preservationists, historians, and more bring these places and spaces to life for you to enjoy from the comfort of your home or office. Stay tuned for more exciting Travel to programs to be announced over the course of the year. A quick word about the free Bloomberg Connects app, which you can download on your mobile device if you haven't done so yet. The app features our own Archtober guide, which is for anyone interested in connecting with architecture and design in New York. Whether you are an architectural historian, a design enthusiast, a student, or someone having their first architecture experience, the Archtober Guide is designed to help you explore notable contemporary and historical sites across New York City's 5 boroughs. Find it on the Bloomberg Connects app. Today, we're thrilled to be traveling virtually to Glasgow, Scotland, for a tour of the newly refurbished Burrell Collection, a decorative and fine arts museum in Glasgow situated on the grounds of Pollok Park. We're joined today by Anne Perry, Design Manager of the Burrell Renaissance Project at the Glasgow Museums, and Catherine Watts, Associate at John McAslan Partners. A little bit about our speakers. Anne Perry led the design team on the Burrell project and managed all design elements in the project, including the gallery displays, graphics, retail, catering, and orientation, and was responsible for the coordination between the architectural team and the exhibition designers to achieve the highest standards in an international iconic museum. This contributed to the Burrell winning multiple awards, including the prestigious Art Fund Museum of the Year. Anne previously worked as design manager on the redevelopment of the highly successful Kelvin Grove Museum and is project leader of the National Trust Burns Museum in Ayrshire. Catherine Watts is an architect accredited in building conservation and a RIBA accredited specialist conservation architect, and leads the conservation and heritage team at John McAslan Partners. Catherine has extensive experience in the alteration and repair of historic buildings and wide-ranging experience in leading the design team for complex projects within historic buildings. Catherine was involved in the redevelopment of King's Cross Station for a number of years, taking the project from design development to completion, including working closely with the contractors for 3 years as the heritage advisor. Recently, Catherine led the transformation of St. Albans Museum and Gallery, which was awarded 2019 RIBA East Regional Award and RIBA East Conservation Award. I'm very happy to now welcome Anne, who will present first, and then Catherine, who will present after that. We'll have time at the end for audience questions. Please feel free to input questions throughout the program at the bottom of your screen. Enjoy.
Hi, good afternoon, and thank you for having me and allowing me to share this project with you. I will focus mostly on the exhibition elements within the galleries, and Catherine will focus more on the architecture. So I will go through some slides with you just now. Next, I'm not scrolling the slides, so we'll move on. So the Burrell Collection is located outside Glasgow city centre. It's in a park, Pollok Park, to keep it away from the city centre, and that's part of the deed of gift by Burrell. The museum was part of an architectural competition, and it's a bespoke design which houses a collection of almost 9,000 objects gifted to the city by the collector Sir William Burrell and Lady Constance Burrell. The building was in much disrepair with leaks, poor environmental conditions, and really not fit for purpose. And it was putting the collection at risk, and visitor numbers were falling. So a successful funding campaign was launched in 2014 for a major refurbishment of the building and the galleries and the displays. Next, please. The key principles of the building and the collection: when the architect Barry Gasson and his team designed the building, he wanted a harmonious building with the collection and work with the collection. It was very bespoke. So he integrated objects within the fabric of the building. He had key vistas, as you see from these images, throughout the building. He looked at visitor flows. We had iconic spaces, one of which is shown here, which is the North Gallery, which is a daylight gallery, which looks onto the woodland, very unusual in a museum because of the high light levels. And he also put a variety of spaces, small galleries within the centre of the museum to be able to control light. So we as a team wanted to enhance that and enhance the vistas, show the collection to its best, and show the collection to its best advantage. Next, please. The quality of the building and the original displays was of the highest standard. The materials specified by Gasson were limestone, sandstone, and the craftsmanship was of the highest standard. So we wanted to build on that aesthetic and make it better. We referenced and looked for inspiration from the original architectural vision. So we wanted to create a unique display language, which was for the Burrell. So we were very careful in choosing our materials because we always wanted to reference back to the original specification. So we worked with contractors by engaging them early on and to look at samples and detailing, which led on to prototyping, which we prototyped a lot of elements within the museum to allow our staff, our internal staff, curators, conservators, technicians to look at and assess, our access and focus groups to look at, and also our heritage groups, because the museum is listed, which means we can't change the museum, the design, or the cases without permission. So the prototyping stage was quite a long stage, but a very important stage for the Burrell project. Next, please. Originally, the Burrell wasn't fully open to all visitors. There were areas that visitors could not access. So when the architects came on board, we wanted them to open up the museum as much as possible for visitors and not have closed off areas. So level 1, which is in the lower ground floor, had stores and offices, workshops, but wasn't accessible by visitors apart from the cafe. So we wanted to open that up for the collection. So we opened up the stores by putting a glazed window, a glazed panel in with AV on it, and a reveal that we could see the store into the stores. On the level 2, a lot of the galleries were quite small and we couldn't display our large textiles and tapestries. So the architects came up with the idea of making larger galleries by knocking 2 galleries into a larger gallery. The visitor flow throughout the ground floor was also quite prescriptive. So we wanted visitors to have a choice of which route to follow. So again, the architects made the building more permeable and visitors could choose where to go. On level 3, the upper level, these were mostly offices with small galleries. So we removed the offices to create displays for visitors. And we also, the galleries weren't used because the building was in such a state of disrepair. So we had to remove the collection and to protect the collection. So we had to refurbish all of these galleries. But we did increase the overall display, as you can see on the screen, by over 60%. So it was quite an achievement. Next slide, please. So we wanted, as I said, increased access to the collections. When the building originally opened, 20% of the collection was accessible by visitors. At closure, 16% of the collection was accessible because, as I previously mentioned, the environmental conditions weren't suitable for the collection and it was putting the collection at risk. On opening, 95% of the collection is now visibly accessible for visitors. We increased key areas of the collection for visitors. Stained glass by 75%, tapestries and carpets by 60%, small textiles by 20%, paintings by 60%, and ceramics by 30%. So you can see there's a huge increase for visitors. Visitors previously weren't aware of the scope and the size of the collection. And on the screen here, I don't know if they're very visible, but there are original sketches by Barry Gasson, which show very dense displays. But in reality, it wasn't like that when it opened. Next slide, please. So one of our first tasks with the designers, to work with the designers, is to have the curators identify the key objects in the collection. So each curator had to identify these objects, and then the designers located these objects in key areas of the museum to draw visitors through the museum rather than have them in one gallery or spread across a couple of galleries. And that was quite a big task at the beginning, but it helped the designers organise the collection. Next, please. Another way that the designers organised the collection was to split the collection into 3 levels, the interpretation of the collection into 3 levels. So on level 1 were the stores. So this was to see this extent and breadth of the collection in the object stores. We can't display everything at the same time. There's just too large a collection. So this is another way of visitors to access the stores. On level 2, which are the main galleries, we did a lot of evaluation and consultation with visitors of what they wanted to see, what they wanted to know about the objects. And a lot of visitors wanted to know where these objects came from and how they actually ended up in the Burrell collection. And on level 3, in the smaller galleries, another observation or response from visitors was that they wanted to see how these objects were made, how they were carved, where they were made, and who created them. So on the 3rd level, we have the makers' galleries. Next slide, please. Another challenge we had with the Burrell, when we asked visitors what the Burrell was, they didn't really know. They thought it was the name of the building. They just didn't know what it was, thought it was the name of somebody, but they didn't know what it was. So there wasn't really an introduction to Burrell, Sir William Burrell, when we came into the museum. So what we did was create 2 spaces within the museum. So when visitors enter, they know exactly what the Burrell collection is about. So we had one of these, which is Burrell in Glasgow. Burrell used to live in Glasgow and he started collecting when he lived in Glasgow. So this gallery shows the extent of his collection of when he started collecting. And the other is what we call a Hutton room. This was Burrell at home. Burrell lived in Hutton Castle after he left Glasgow, and he lived with this collection. So we interpreted how he would have lived at home. Next slide, please. So this top image shows the Burrell at Home gallery, and this gallery it's quite a dense display, and it gives an introduction to Burrell, his family, his staff, everybody who lived and worked at Hutton Castle. And this is interpreted through audiovisual and labels and tactile displays, but it's quite an immersive experience. So visitors do know who Burrell is, and this gallery has been very successful, and it's a different aesthetic to the rest of the museum. It's quite traditional, but it was to give a sense of his home life. The image below is a cleaner aesthetic, and this shows Burrell as he was starting to collect when he lived in Glasgow. It gives an idea of how he lived in Glasgow, where he lived, his house in Glasgow, and his offices in Glasgow. So this gives a good introduction to the museum for visitors. Next slide, please. Again, we wanted to look at the different type of display spaces within the museum. There was the key iconic display spaces. Our most iconic display space is the North Gallery, which looks directly onto woodland. And there's a lot of daylight in there. The other spaces were small galleries, the rooms in the centre where we could control light and display different elements of the collection. And the other element we looked at was circulation space and the entrance, which were problematic because visitors weren't moving around the building as we wanted them and they weren't seeing everything. Next slide, please. This is a visual of the North Gallery. The North Gallery, as I said previously, looks directly onto woodland. And from visitor comments, we know that this is the most memorable space in the museum. It's quite a challenging space to display the collection because we cannot control light. So it's mostly sculpture we have in this area. It's quite a long space, but we've ordered it to draw visitors through the space. And it remains one of the most popular galleries within the museum. Next slide, please. This is one of the architectural interventions in the gallery. This was originally 2 rooms or 3 small galleries, which were knocked into one large space. And this was an idea from the architects, so we could show our tapestry collection. Previously, we could not show large tapestries, or it was very, very challenging for us to show large tapestries. Now we have these big galleries, which we display our tapestries and textiles, and we have AV visuals to help the interpretation of these galleries, and they have proved to be very popular. Next slide, please. This is one of the smaller galleries. Again, we can control light in these galleries. We can put more light-sensitive objects in these galleries. We can show multiple displays in here. So these, again, are giving the visitor a different experience as they go around the museum. Next slide, please. This stained glass display at the lower image in this slide was originally designed by McAslan, and it was stained glass along the whole south elevation of the building. So we asked the designers to enhance this, put more stained glass in here, and just get our collection on display. So they came up with the idea of putting stained glass also on the upper level. So it's a double height stained glass display. And this is, again, proved very popular, especially for selfies. But you can also see into the park from through the glass into the parkland. So it's, again, a very popular gallery. Next slide, please. This is one of our makers gallery. So this is the stonemasons gallery, where we look in depth at how the makers worked with stone. We have interactives in here. We have tactile displays, and it's aimed at all audiences. So each gallery looks in depth at material, whether it's stone, whether it's wood, whether it's pastels. But again, these galleries responded to visitors' comments, and they have been very popular. Next slide, please. This is a visual of our stores, how we made our stores more accessible. We obviously can't have visitors walking through our stores unless they're on guided tours. So we have a glass panel in front of the stores and onto which AV has projected. And on that AV, it shows you how many items are in the collection. There are numerous items of glass, of medieval sculpture, chairs, whatever. There was a lot of glass, but this gives numbers about how much we've got in the collection. And every 10 minutes or so, the audio-visual stops and there's a reveal into the store, so visitors can actually see into the store. So it's quite a theatrical moment. Next, please. When we were working with the designers on the display furniture, we obviously referenced the original aesthetic as developed by Barry Gasson. But what we also wanted to do was limit the amount of components we used and limit the materials, and also to make the museum as flexible as possible so we can change displays without having to buy new furniture and new cases. The original cases were quite bespoke for individual objects, so we always had to change them for an object of the same size. But now we have larger cases that we can change, and we can have multi-display objects. So the components are very limited. In front of you is the list of all the components in the gallery. So that was quite a challenge, honing it down to this level. Next slide, please. Again, we looked carefully at materials, and we were guided and influenced by the materials within the museum. And again, we wanted to limit the palette. We wanted the display cases and furniture to be beautiful, but not to overshadow the object. So we had a very limited selection of materials which we used for all the components in the galleries, for all the display components in the galleries, and for all the interactive housing in the galleries. Next, please. Again, when we were looking at the dimensions of all the display furniture, we used the building as a reference point. So we used the grid in the building as a reference point for all the sizes. And obviously we related that to our access requirements. But we did use these dimensions, and they did work. They did work for our access panels. And when they looked at the cases and display units, they were accessible. So we were quite strict in sticking to this again. And also that's why the museum is very comfortable to walk around. It just feels right. Next slide, please. The different display component we had is in the Makers Gallery, and we were influenced by makers' workshops. So we had a table approach here, where we would put a case, but a table and an interactive. It's still got the same aesthetic, the same materials, but it's a slightly different approach and a different interpretation of the collection. Next slide, please. With the graphics, we also limited the different types of graphics. We limited images in the galleries. We used images when necessary, because we had a lot of AV in the museum, and we used a lot of images through the AV. So every component in the graphics were tested with audiences, tested with all our access panels, and we really limit the word count, because in our experience, visitors do not read a lot of words on labels. They tend to, if they want more information, they can tend to look it up. So we did limit this. It was very challenging to do, but it's got a very clean aesthetic, it's easy to read, and it's very accessible. We also used our target audiences. We have a target audiences. So for each display, like pre-fives, we had images or tactile images to introductions for everybody, and we used an image there. Next slide, please. When we were making, designing, or the design company were designing the showcases, we had to look at the original showcases and decide what was wrong with them, and there was quite a lot wrong with them. We had to keep the same aesthetic because it was a heritage building, but make them, improve them for our current day standards. So the issues we had with them were the conservation. They didn't control the environment. Access, you couldn't see, the glass was highly reflective, and visitors couldn't see into the cases easily. Security, there was gaps, and the locks weren't great. Safety, the glass specification wasn't, it didn't meet current health and safety requirements. And the lighting, a lot of the cases did not have lighting and they were lit from above, so it didn't give us that flexibility. The glass that was on the case also had a slightly green tinge, which gave all the collection a slightly green tinge throughout the museum. So we wanted to change that, so we changed the glazing, we upgraded the environment, we future-proofed them for different types of interpretation, like AV or attaching manual interactives or tactile interactives to them, but we had to maintain the same aesthetic. So we had to prototype these and get them approved by our heritage bodies. Next slide, please. So these are our display cases. They're quite unusual because they have a limestone base. So there was, and the original limestone place you could not access, so you couldn't get cabling into it or conservation equipment into it. So what we had to do is design these quite a complicated engineering system, so you could slide them open and they'd be future-proofed, but they also had to look like the original cases. So that there was a lot of work with our showcase designers to get this correct. Next slide, please. We also looked at how we would display objects, and we put them into different categories. Single object display, but you can see a single object display is in a large case, so we can future-proof that case. It can be flexible for future displays. Next, please. We had small group object displays, which again are flexible, and we could have stories around a small group of objects. Next slide, please. Again, we had a larger group of object displays. This is in our colour gallery, so the objects were organised into colour, and it's quite a dramatic gallery. And again, visitors remember this gallery, and it helps with orientation, that you know you're in this gallery because it's very different to other galleries. Next slide, please. These are our mass object displays. Again, we have the mass object display that we use. People take selfies in front of them, and they're great for PR for the museum. And so we have a few of these dotted around the museum. This is weapons, and the other one is vases. And again, they're on social media quite a lot. Next, please. This is when we were arranging the objects, we wanted to put key objects in vistas to draw people through the museum. It's a deceptively large building, and there are corridors within this building. There's 2 long corridors, so we wanted to put objects at the end of these corridors to pull people through and also orientate them so they would remember where they were. Previously, the objects were displayed, they weren't displayed in key vistas. They just were displayed where they suited in the gallery. Next, please. So this, again, this is one of the major architectural interventions. There was which Catherine will talk about, who's following on from me. So the architects, there was a lecture theatre which was underused. We never used it. So the architects came up with a solution and also provided vertical access through the building. It also provided us a space to display some of our larger stained glass collection, which we'd never been able to display before, and it's on the wall. Again, this is very popular and it's used for lectures and just sitting around. And another key object was the Warwick vase, which is in the courtyard. We couldn't remove this during the display, so it remains where it always was, in the courtyard. And that's quite a social space where people come and gather. Next is, okay, I think that was the last of my slides. I will hand you over to Catherine now, who will talk about the architectural challenges in the building. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I'll share my screen. I hope everybody can see that. The shipping magnate Sir William Burrell was an avid art collector. He amassed a collection of some 9,000 art objects, and he gifted the entire collection to the city of Glasgow in 1944. Alongside that, he made some stipulations relating to his collection. Particularly, he requested that the art should be shown as if it was in a private house, and he had in mind his house, Hutton Castle, which you can see on the right there. He also stipulated that the collection should be shown at least 16 miles from the centre of Glasgow, and this was because pollution was so bad at that time. So the collection, it's very wide-ranging. It contains many internationally significant works of art, ranging from medieval, Islamic, Chinese, Egyptian, and also quite well-known French Impressionist works of art. It has sculptures, paintings, stained glass tapestries, furniture, and even the building fabrics, which are built into it, into the new building. So alongside this, a few years later, in 1967, Mrs. Anne Maxwell MacDonald gifted Pollok House and the 360 acres of Pollok Estate to the city of Glasgow. Pollok Park is only 3 miles from the city centre, but because pollution had fallen, the pollution levels had fallen so considerably in the intervening time, it was seen as an acceptable place to display the art. In 1972, an international competition was held to design a new museum for the Burrell Collection in Pollok Park. 3 young architects from Cambridge University, Barry Gasson, John Meunier, and Britt Anderson, won the competition with their elegant and sensitive building design. These concept sketches you can see show some of the key design moves that they described in their competition entrance. So the siting of the building against the trees, this using that woodland light, shaded and woodland experience was a key part of the design, and they refer to it as the Walk in the Woods Gallery. Also, by nestling the large building in the corner of the site, it keeps the views in the space open for the landscape. The long experiential entrance sequence into the building has a kind of preparation effect for the visitors to the gallery of anticipation. This long corridor that you can see here. And in addition, the Hutton rooms, which were the replication rooms from the Hutton Castle, they were centered around this courtyard, which is a kind of semi-outdoor type of space. Well, it's internal, but the impression is that you look through the windows from the Hutton rooms and see into this courtyard. And then apart from that, then the circulation was quite strategic on the perimeter, as well as the way that the building could be divided in half, so that the front half, the northern half, the southern half can be used for out of hours. So these are some of the rendered perspectives that the winning architect team prepared. So you can see this Walk in the Woods Gallery is quite atmospheric, and it's almost like you're outside. And then here the sort of clever massing, the way it just nestled into the landscape, and actually kind of disguises the fact that it's such a big building. And then the top left is the competition model. So when the building was opened in 1983, it was widely acclaimed, both both the public, the visitors' numbers were high, and architectural acclaim was high as well. In fact, it was so well loved in the architectural community that only 30 years later it was listed. It was listed at Category A. Category A is the highest listed status in Scotland, and it's very rare for such a young building to be listed at such a high category. And it's also very rare for a building to be listed on its 30th birthday, because that's the earliest time that it could be listed. So it's a very special building. The Burrell is of exceptional architectural and historical importance, being that it's an outstanding bespoke design of late modern theory with an emphasis on the human vernacular. It marked the key turning point in the regeneration of Glasgow and its transformation from a failing industrial city into one of the world's top cities for culture. So these show some of the architectural fragments which were built into the museum. You can see it's built into the modern wall. So this slide is just a compilation of some of the museums which were built at the same, well, within the same kind of few decades, and you can see the kind of context that the Burrell Collection was built in. So we've got the sort of Sainsbury's Centre by Foster, which is very different aesthetic, and you can sort of see some hints in the Burrell Collection of this postmodern architecture, which was quite popular in the 80s. We've also, it was built after the Hayward Gallery in London, which is much more on the sort of brutalist concrete type of architecture, and similarly the Barbican Centre. I think the most compelling precedent, though, in terms of the influence on Gasson and his colleagues was the Louisiana Museum in Copenhagen, which has got that similar relationship with the outside, the art against the landscape. So when we came to the building in 2015, the task was quite daunting. It was the first major refurbishment project of the building. So everything we looked at was original to the building. There was no kind of, not many things had been ruined by changes or the passage of time. Well, there were lots of problems associated with the building, but it was more a matter of kind of trying to work out what we could change. So the problems that we encountered were the building envelope. You can see here when we arrived, the building was leaking. It wasn't in a fit state to house a collection of such high quality. It was, and also not water, neither water nor airtight. The entrance was seen, whilst it's a kind of quite evocative architectural experience going through the entrance, it was seen as a barrier to most people. People would visit the park but not dare to almost not dare to go into the museum. The circulation, so within the building, circulation, people tended to sort of bypass parts of the museum and just focus on the others. So that was addressed. Services, we needed to replace the services because they'd come to the end of their design life. The exhibition, which Anne's talked about a lot, but I think it was quite sort of tired and needed refreshment. And then this big question, this big picture in the middle is the lecture theatre, which, whilst you were only able to use it at some periods, and most of the time it was just a big sort of dead space in the middle of of the building. So that was an opportunity for change. And then apart from that, the retail was also due for refreshment. So our proposals, you can see on the top left, this is the what we call the Agora. This is the lecture space, which is not just a lecture space. It's the kind of heart of the building now, and allows for views through connection vertically, whilst also possible to use it as a lecture theatre with the rake seating. And then addressing the entrances. So our main new entrance was alongside the original one. It doesn't replace it; it complements it, but it was a way to get much more immediate contact with the surroundings. And whilst it's kind of quite a major move, it's also not. There wasn't that much change as such required to make it happen. Then at the bottom left, you can see this Walk in the Woods gallery. There was a lot of work done in the gallery to upgrade it, including the building envelope. Glass was replaced, the curtain walling was replaced, the roof was replaced, all the flat roofs were replaced, and made much more suitable for housing the collection. But it hasn't really changed. It still very much is the architectural intent of Barry Gusson. And then externally, it was really a refreshing of the landscape, some areas of paving for increased visitor numbers, and just making it a more usable space. You can see that better on this slide. So the additional entrance, as well as this main additional entrance adjacent to the old one, there's also other entrances. So, like for instance, people could come in to the cafe or sit out. You can now sit outside on the terrace outside the cafe. And then the accessibility, the routes into the building was also upgraded. So there you can see the plans and the model, and you can see how that Agora, the orientation hub, sits in the building, how it kind of now links both horizontally and vertically through the building, making connections and making the gallery more easy to understand when you're navigating. So those are some construction photographs. On the left, the landscape, and on the right is the Agora structure being built there. That was our main. The Agora was our main architectural intervention, or the main visible one. There were a lot of others that are less apparent. And so you can see the finished building on the left there. And just to put it in context, it really hasn't changed very much in spite of, it really hasn't changed much in its appearance in spite of extensive work in upgrading the fabric. You can see on the roof here the array of photovoltaics which have been added onto the roof. And then also you can see the upgraded curtain walling, and so the insulation was improved, glazing, curtain walling replaced to much higher air tightnesses, and also the glazing has much higher solar control to it. The aluminium was all recycled, and so was the glass. So here you can see some of this is the entrance into the cafe, and then the other new entrance up there, and then some of the landscaping interventions you can see in that photograph. And similar again there. And the dusk shot. So obviously the entrance is a little bit more obvious with the lights on in the dusk. And that shows you on the left, this is the new entrance with the converted hut and room. And on the right, there's the previous entrance with its kind of spatial manipulation as you go into the building. So that's been kind of it's still in use as an entrance, but it's slightly less cluttered with the cafe in there, and it's just been sort of cleaned and conserved. So this is the courtyard with the hut and rooms which look onto it, and you can also see the Hornby portal in this view, which is one of the architectural fragments which is built into the building. Just as a view of the ceiling, the roof, and the walk in the woods. So you can see the before and after there. So it really doesn't look like it's changed, but a lot has changed. And I like to think, so whilst this view actually does look quite different, I feel that what we are able to do now with the modern glass and I mean, the solar control and the modern glass and the insulation and the airtightness, we've been able to really do what Barry Gasson was trying to do. Obviously, in the past, they had to use the blinds, and that connection was possibly a little bit lost. The connection with the woods was a little bit lost, depending on the daylight conditions. And then there you can see the old lecture theatre and our new Agora orientation space. And from another angle. And this on the right, this is the view Anne was talking about, where you can see into the collection store. So when this display is turned off, then you can see the stores behind. And there's some of the galleries, refurbished. And then another move was the relocation of the shop into a much more prominent and expansive location on the southern side of the building, replacing a gallery which was there previously. You can see all the stained glass on the south elevation. And that's the end. That's my last slide.
Thank you so much, Catherine, and thank you so much, Anne, for both of your presentations. We're going to take some questions from the audience, so please feel free to use the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen. We have a couple questions to start us off. The first question is for you, Anne. How were the collections stored and handled during the restoration? Were they moved to a secondary location, or was the architectural work done in phases to keep the collections within the museum?
No, the collection was decanted into our stores and another museum. We kept a display open in another museum. There were some of the collection we could not remove, which were the architectural fragments that were integrated into the building, and the Warwick vase. It was just too big to get out of the building. It was impossible to move. So yeah, it wasn't phased around the collection. The collection was removed to allow the contractors just to charge on with it.
Great. Catherine, the next question is for you, and I guess could be for Anne as well. The question is, did you discover any unexpected features about the building during the restoration process?
Well, there was an enabling works contract, which was so that we didn't have too many surprises. And there were some things that couldn't be discovered during that time because to get into all the services ducts were actually quite difficult. I mean, it's such a young building. It's not like you're uncovering, something that's been developed over a number of years. So from that point of view, it was, you saw what you get, but there was certainly some surprises relating to these services ducts and, trying to work out what went where and that kind of thing.
Great. The next question, Anne, is for you. Anne, can you talk a little bit more about the community engagement process when you were putting together the 3 levels of the visitor experience? Did you hold events or send out surveys or communicate in a different way to receive feedback?
We did all of these things. We worked very closely with our communities, local communities, focus groups, and we consulted them throughout the project. They looked at all our prototypes. We assessed all our prototypes with them, our graphics, our text, our cases. They were very, very involved. We involved local schools. And there's a little nursery group, park nursery group in the park. So we involved them as well. What do you want to see in this building? So we have a history of consultation with communities. We don't just give them things they don't want to do. We involve them all the way. And they were involved in some of the story displays and interpretation also.
Awesome. Yeah, I really thought the kind of maker level that you integrated into the museum was super interesting. I feel like that is quite unusual in museums in that way. So that was really cool to see.
Yeah. And that was in direct response to visitor comments of what they would like to see. And it is very successful and very popular.
Great. The next question is for you, Catherine. The question is, you don't see a lot of museums with this much glazing because the damage the sunlight does to the artwork. How was that thought through? I think you touched on this a little bit at the end with the kind of new technologies in glazing, but if you want to expand on that.
Yeah, I mean, obviously some things are more sensitive to light than others, but with the use of the solar control glazing, then it meant that we could expose those, obviously not delicate watercolors to daylight, but the sculpture and things were a little bit less sensitive. I think, and it wasn't just the solar control. It's also the whole kind of the way that we managed to upgrade the envelope to the thermal performance and also air tightness, and by making those improved, I've got some stats here actually. So we managed to improve the thermal performance by approximately 50%. And we improved the air tightness by 74%. So by doing both of those moves, then you're kind of halfway there in terms of displaying the art. If the building is capable of going up to museological standards, then the display cases have less work to do in that sense. Yeah. Sorry, I don't know if you want to add to that, Anne, because it's.
Yeah, I'll add. Yes, it was quite challenging with all the daylight. That's why I showed in the slides how we organised our collection. So it's mostly sculpture that's in the North Galleries, and we have 2 long corridors with daylight as well, and we organised the collection in there so they would not be affected. It wouldn't deteriorate the collections. So we worked very closely with our conservation department on selecting the correct objects.
The next question is for Anne. Anne, can you talk about the exhibition schedule? You mentioned how the display cases are designed to be somewhat modular to be easily updated. So how often do the displays change over, and kind of what is the plan moving forward for that kind of cadence?
We do change our displays. We change our displays within the cases. That's why I mentioned previously we have larger cases rather than the cases which were designed by the original architects, which were very bespoke, and they became quite inflexible. There's a modular size to all the display furniture, so we can reconfigure it and it will all go back, to different shapes. It's not limitless, but we can reconfigure it within galleries. We also have a power grid in the floor now, which was quite an extensive part of the project to get more power in. So we can put cases above this power grid, and we can have AV in the cases, interpretation and lighting, which was a thing that Barry Gasson and his team did consider, but they didn't take it that step further, so we've taken it much further. So it does refer to the original vision.
Great. I think we have time for maybe one or two more questions. Catherine, could you talk a little bit more about the material recycling that you mentioned? I think you said the aluminum and the glass. Was that correct?
Yeah. So so there was a quite intensive glazing recycling sort of study that was done by mainly by Arup, our facade consultants, and they sort of managed to trace all of the glass recycling all the way to the end, and make sure that actually all of the glass was recycled and was put to use in either in the building itself or in other areas, in other projects. The aluminium is relatively easy to recycle, and we made sure that all of the aluminium was reused either in the building or elsewhere.
Great. Well, thank you so much, Catherine and Anne. I think we're about at time. And thank you all so much for joining us today. And thank you to Bloomberg Connects for sponsoring this series. And hope you all have a great rest of your day.